Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our August 1st morning session of the meeting of the Board of Commissioners. Hard to believe that it is already, as I'm looking here and looking at August the 1st, that's hard to believe. But I do call our meeting to order, and as traditional, we will have a prayer and a pledge, and I have called on Commissioner Patrick Harris, our Vice Chair, to lead the prayer, and we have Vietnam Veterans America 990 here to lead us in the pledge. So, Wood, please rise.
Let us pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you this morning in humble appreciation for the opportunity to be here. Father, we thank you for the blessings that you bring to this county and to our land. Father, we ask that you bless this meeting today as we go about the people's business. And Father, we ask that you give us strength and wisdom and courage to do what is right. Father, we ask that you watch over our service members and our first responders, Father. Keep them safe as they protect those that are in harm's way. Father, we just ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Commissioner Brazel to join us as a member of our chapter.
Sure. Give him a second to get down there.
Yeah.
It's not as quick as he used to be.
Please place the flag. Who it what present arms. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What home. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you for your service. We were soldiers and young.
Yes. And as Commissioner Brazel is taking his seat, the first item up is approval of the agenda. Is there any discussion on that, or do I hear a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move the agenda be approved as stated. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's approved. Next up, we have our consent agenda items, and it looks like, if I can do my math right, there's 3 this time. We have some appointments to our Industrial Facilities Pollution Control Financing Authority, the Johnston County Board of Adjustments, and our Library Board of Trustees. We also have some budget revisions. We have a budget revision for our Health Department. Let me scan through here. Looks like a couple for those. And some for our LEO separation for that, public utilities, and for our sheriff's budget. We have some adjustments there, as well as social services, and we also have some tax releases and refunds. Any discussion on those items, or any item need to be withdrawn for further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
There, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda items are approved. Next on the agenda is public comments. This is a time for any member of the audience to come forward and speak to us regarding an issue that is not on the agenda. You will have 3 minutes. If you would come forward and please state your name and your general location, and just remember to maintain proper decorum and make all comments in a civil manner. And again, this is an opportunity for the board to listen. There was not an opportunity for questions and answers and back and forth. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for your time today. My name is Christine Livingston, and I live in the McGee's Crossroads area. I want to thank first Commissioner Stevens and Lauder for reaching out to me after the July 18th Commissioner meeting where I spoke in your 6 p.m. public comments. I appreciate you for that. In regards to the garbage decal, this was a promise that the Board of Commissioners made to the people. This upcoming renewal, there would be none. You all have had 2 years to figure this out, and a motion to approve by Mr. Smith was placed to allow more time and then was seconded. And then the motion carried, and there was no discussion. Why did we not have a discussion in this matter? And thank you for bringing that up that day. I live in an unincorporated area and use the facilities, and we deserve an answer to this question. I would appreciate it if you could fix this, because broken promises to the people is a shame, but it seems that it's nothing new. In regards to the land use meetings, in recent past meetings, none of you have been present, but some sure made a presence at the future parks meetings. Yes, parks are important, but right now what is more important? We are going into 3 years now on this land use agreement process. While Joco is short on schools and water, but certainly no shortage of rooftops. I don't know about you, but as my friend Jim would say, rooftop sandwiches sure don't taste good. I also see that Mr. Braswell is still present here, and I see that he has been attending many meetings within this county since he was charged. Again, innocent until proven guilty or otherwise. We know there is no general statute that can force this in this county. However, his presence makes many of us uncomfortable, including myself. This alleged charge does involve a child. When others are arrested or under investigation in other positions in this county, they are put on suspension until their case is cleared. There is no way for you all to let him go, so you say. However, I would like to bring up an interesting way for informational use today. The context was taken from Robert Joyce of UNC School of Government, a blog post. A member of the Board of Commissioners may move that a vacancy is declared. An example I will give you. I move that Dickie Braswell's seat on this board be declared vacant because he has been determined that he cannot fulfill the mission statement of the Board of the County Commissioners, and he was duly appointed by us, meaning you, and not voted in by we the people. And this board proceeds to fill the vacancy as approved by law. The board then should vote on the motion, and Mr. Braswell also has the right to vote as he is still on the board. Although there is no specific statutory provision for declaring a vacancy, there is, from the board's point of view, a keen advantage to proceeding this way because he was appointed and not voted in. It would be nice if the county would adopt a policy like General Statute 160A-59, spelling out whether or not someone is eligible to hold office. This should be within your purview. And I'm sorry it took me a little bit to speak. I'm recovering from surgery, and I did not want to have to come here in person, but since no one responds to emails, I had no choice. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming, and hope you have a fast recovery.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Come forward. Yeah, if you would, you state your name and where you're from. Generally, you don't have to give the address.
My name's Tony Tedderton, and I've lived in Johnston County for 17 years and just recently moved away, but it's come to my attention, specifically this morning, that there are people that would too quickly convict somebody for alleged crimes, and I just want to remind people that for 800 years there has been a presumption of innocence in this country until proven guilty, and I think that it is unconscionable that anyone suggest that we convict someone before they've had a trial. And I'm sure that most of you agree with that, but there are certain people in the public that don't, but you can't let mob rule. So I appreciate your concern.
Thank you, Mr. Tedderton. Anyone else? I don't think there's anyone in the hall, so. And Madam Clerk, do we just have the one email? So we had an email from Shannon Peterson that had really two things in it. One was the lack of reply to emails, which Ms. Weber had mentioned, and I will, even though I'm not supposed to ad lib here, I will a little bit. I think that, at least from some commissioners, realize that there probably is a response due on most any and all things. So I think that was, we've heard that. The other issue that Mr. Peterson brought forward is our lack of an ethics policy, and I think that's something that we have talked with staff about many times, and I think that's something that we kind of have policies that we follow. I don't think we have our own policy, but I think it's, if I'm speaking as the School of Government policies, if you want to expand on that a little bit before I step into something I don't need to.
You do actually have an adopted code of ethics. You do. What we're going to talk about maybe a little bit later are the rules of procedure, but you do have an adopted code of ethics.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. And I think that was the only email comment we had, so. And next up, we'll have Ms. Jocelyn Andrews to speak to our delinquent tax collection report.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. I've got 3 matters before you this morning. The first of which is my normal monthly summary. I'm not going to get into, I never get into much detail on that, but I'm not now because the second thing incorporates that. As you see, the monthly summary is for the month of June, which is the last month in the fiscal year. Thus, item number 2 is my annual settlement. What this is basically it's a calculation and overview of all ad valorem taxes for fiscal year 21-22, and the highlights of which are as follows. As you can see, the county levy was an all-time high at $157 million. 92.12%, which is $144 million of that, was timely remitted by the citizens of this county. Those were voluntary payments. Those were not forced collections. Those were voluntary payments of $144 million. After the January, or once the January 6th date hit, we then, staff began collecting those items that had not been timely remitted and collected the remainder that had been collected for a total of 99.88% collection for the year. Of that $157 million, the only amount that was unpaid was $184,000. Again, this was only achieved through the efforts of the citizens, the staff, and support of this body. As I mentioned in my summary, which is at the end of that settlement, growth in this county is nothing you haven't heard about before, but my office definitely sees it on a regular basis. And just one little indication that shows you, in 2019, when we had our last reval, we had about 100,000 parcels. And as of this year, we're at 111,000 parcels. So we are, not only are we seeing improvements to parcels that existed and have not changed, but we're also seeing, dividing of parcels and things of that sort. The interesting part of this, and I mentioned also in that summary, is that due to the low sales ratio, which is basically a comparison of what the 2019 tax value was compared to what actual sales rates are today, the Department of Revenue, by statute, has to look at those sales ratios every year, and we got pushed into basically a mandatory advancement on our reappraisal. But fortunately, this body had the foresight in 2019 to go ahead and advance it from an 8-year reval to basically 6-year, and then as it stands now, y'all have set it for every 4 years after. So fortunately, because again, the foresight of this body, we were already preparing for a 2025 reval, which is what the Department of Revenue has advanced. Just so you know, we're not the only county that got re-advanced or got advanced. So again, thank you for getting us ready for that. So over the next few months, I'll have some some things that y'all will need to consider, as it is our pre-appraisal vendor and other reappraisal tools that we'll need to get ready. And then the third thing that you have before you this morning is your consideration of the 2022 charge to collect taxes. It's that time of year again. When we start the process again. Bills are scheduled to be mailed today, and then we start it again. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but those are the 3 matters that you have before you.
Any questions on the report or the, charge to collect taxes for 2022?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your report. Do you know what the levy is for this year?
I have seen an approximate levy, but I will see it probably later this week. And in fact, I'll probably have it later today.
Can you share with us the approximate levy?
160, and again, approximate 164 million.
Okay, thank you.
Now, keep in mind, let me clarify, when our initial levy comes out this time of year and we send the bills, that does not include what are considered public service. So in other words, anything that is mass transportation or power or that infrastructure companies that are in the county, those bills are, or those assessments are generated based on information we receive from the Department of Revenue, and those are not billed until September. So that will increase again in September.
I'm just curious as to, last year we had a $6 million increase, $6 to $7 million increase, and we've talked about all the new parcels, and yet this $164 million is only a $6 to $7 million increase for this year.
So the increase, a couple of things. Values right now are still based on 2019 schedule of values. So in other words, whatever was deemed to be the cost of construction back in 2019 is what we have to apply to improved properties now, okay? So thus our challenge when we get to the 2025 reappraisal is what is the new cost of doing business. So in other words, somebody builds a house today, obviously their cost is significantly more than 2019, but based on the condition, type of house, and you're very familiar with this type thing, our tax value is based on what the values were in 2019, okay? Now, of these new parcels, basically 11,000 new parcels since 2019, not all of them are improved parcels at this time. So we're not real sure. Now, some, they've obviously been split with what we believe to be the intention of building, some sort of construction, commercial, residential, whatever. But because they are not complete or quite frankly, some haven't been started yet, we haven't, they're not on our tax roster at the improved value because they are not deemed to be improved properties yet.
But if a home is built this year, it's taxed based upon this year's cost.
So whatever each year is based on January 1st, that is the magic date in the tax office. January 1st of each year, we have to value all property in the county as to what its condition was. If something is under construction, it's still at whatever its prior value is. If it's completed in July, it will be a January 1st of 2023 increase because it is not completed construction at that time.
But that's at the current rate, not the 2019 rate.
That is at the 2019 rate. That is at the 2019 rate. We have to go with whatever our most current schedule of values, and it's basically to kind of keep fairness in the county. So say your individual property that you're looking at that you haven't made any improvements to it. Okay, so it was valued at its 2019 rate. You have made no changes since 2019. However, you build something in 2022, it's not fair if we do the new construction at what are 2022 market prices, and then you still have yours at 2019. So everything by law, the way we have to do it is based on whatever our last schedule of values is in our last reval.
So you don't look at the revenue stamps?
Oh, we do. We do. It shows those are recorded, but
if a house is sold and the revenue stamps say it's $300,000, isn't that what you tax it at?
No. That is not tax value. That's market value. And market value is only determined as of date of reval.
Okay.
So in January of 19, we were supposed to be spot on whatever market value was at that time. And our number was it was like 99.9 or 100.01. I mean, it was right at 100%. That is our date we look at. So that's why when we get closer to 2025, it's going to be interesting to see what it's going to be, because all this property in the county will basically, I hate to use this term, but level load it based on whatever the current market is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In my work with the bank, I've seen dramatic changes in the last 9 to 12 months. I mean, over 15 months ago, in early 21, it might have sold for one thing, but in late 21, early 22, God, it wasn't even in the same realm. It was so dramatic.
What's interesting, and to follow up on both of your comments here, is, I talk about in the summary what our sales ratio was with the Department of Revenue. I was kind of surprised it was that high, but because we have to send them information quarterly, and the last couple of quarters that went they weren't nearly that good, but because, there's a lag time, and that is based on calendar year 2021 information. Like you're saying, it's not current information. So, and they have to get it to a certain point, and then they make their decision.
But George, the value is only one part of the equation.
Correct.
It doesn't it's almost irrelevant what the value is until you put the millage rate on it. And that's where you determine whether there's a tax increase or not based on the millage rate that goes on the value.
And one of the things that's interesting is you have spoken to this before, that it's more than, especially when you come to rental properties and it comes to commercial properties and things of that sort. Residential may be a little easier on some of this, but, there are a lot of factors that go into more than you two live beside each other and your whole house just sold for this, therefore yours is worth that. It's more than just that. As you allude to, it is a very complicated matter.
Right.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? And is there more to present on the,
There's no more to
next year,
present, so the next
ready to
action
make the
is for
motion?
you to either decide to accept my settlement or not, and then to charge me or not charge me to collect 2022 taxes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the report and that we empower the collection of this year's taxes.
I second.
all right, motion and second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Looks like the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is appointments. We have, each of you should have found a ballot for two boards that we're considering where we have more applicants than we have positions available. On the ABC board, we have one position available with three applicants who are Jeff Carver, Brian Stewart Galbraith, and Gary R. Underwood. And then the second board is the Hospital Authority Board of Commissioners. And for that, we have one position, it's a 3-year term, and two applicants, Brad Oakes, applied for reappointment, and Florence Burrell, or Burrell, I guess depending on what part of the state you're from, have both applied. And as customary, if you would complete your applications and submit them to the clerk, and we will announce tonight who was selected. I did want to say on the hospital board that in accordance with the memorandum of understanding between the county and the authority, this is a nomination that will be sent to the hospital authority for review and recommendation, and the chairman of the Board of Commissioners will make the final appointment in September. So I think that is all to do with that. So if you would complete your ballots and turn those in at the end of this meeting to the clerk. Next up, we have manager reports and comments. All right. And then it goes to board reports and comments. And the first, before I open it up to the board, is I was to ask our county attorney, Jennifer Slusser, to come forward and discuss the draft rules of procedures for the board to take under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lauder, I know that you will want this electronically. And board members, I know that because I printed this with regards to, and had the comments in the margin, it's a little small, so I'm probably going to put my glasses on. I know you're going to need yours too. But when you get your electronic copy, it will be much easier to manipulate. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you a discussion draft. As was discussed the last time we talked about this, we do not expect any action on this. I'm just introducing it to you today. North Carolina General Statute 153A-41 allows a Board of Commissioners to adopt its own rules of procedure in keeping with the size and nature of the board and in the spirit of generally accepted principles of parliamentary procedure. And what we have been going by for all these years is this book that is well-loved by me and well-used, the Suggested Rules of Procedure for the Board of County Commissioners from the North Carolina School of Government. And that has been the basis of how you have conducted your meetings, with a few exceptions. I did want to go back and talk about one thing that we talked about just a little bit earlier in the public comment portion about the Code of Ethics. Wanted to clarify something on that. The board does have an adopted Code of Ethics, and all of you received training in that, and you received training through the School of Government. I also wanted to mention that that policy is applicable to the Board of Commissioners, but your staff members are held accountable under the Johnston County Personnel Policy, and that's where their accountability and their standards are located. And then, of course, your appointed positions like me and Mr. Hester are accountable to you under the North Carolina General Statute. So I just wanted to be very clear about that.
Thank you for clarifying my mess up this morning.
No, it was not a mess up. I think that...
I think it was.
No, I think that one could look at it different ways, and as I thought about that, I said, let me clarify that the Code of Ethics applies to the board, and some folks may have questions about how staff members in your appointed positions are held accountable. So I wanted to clarify that difference. I think we may have been thinking in two different directions, and sometimes that happens.
At my house, my wife would have told me that was a mistake, so I'm going with those rules.
So going back to your discussion draft, let me kind of explain to you the process of what we did. First of all, we went, and I say we, and the we is the collective we of me and your clerk to the board and your deputy clerk, with the assistance of some other staff members from time to time. But essentially, we went through the suggested rules book that you typically go by, and we put that in the computer. And then we went through and we made changes based on your current practice. And so in the margins, with the little comments, you will see either statutory references that require that you do things a particular way, or I included some notes about what we may do that's a little different. And depending on how you want to go about it, I can walk you through it, or you can take it under advisement and we can talk about it later, whatever way you prefer. But in the comment section, in the little red on the side, you should be able to see pretty clearly what changes we suggested. And honestly, those changes are merely based upon your current practice. I'll give you an example, and this is one that we've talked about before. The suggested rules of procedure for small boards by the School of Government don't require a second for motions. This board has always, the practice has always been to require a second. I think one of the reasons small boards, the suggestion can be, is when you've got a board of 3. In some places, they have small boards like that, a second can be unduly burdensome for a small board. In this particular instance, we have 7 board members, and this board historically has always required seconds. And so we made that change to reflect that practice. And again, every change that we made, we put a little note as to what we changed. And then we've got some items in the margins that say this is a discussion item. You might want to talk a little bit more about this because it doesn't come up very often. But it does, I believe, outline the practice of the Johnston County Board of Commissioners, and I think that you will find that it is consistent with what we do and how we do it. The other thing that we clarified, and this has come up before, is what parliamentary, the rules say that you operate in a spirit of generally accepted principles of parliamentary procedure, recognizing that things like Robert's rules for a small elected board can be unduly cumbersome and overburdensome from time to time. What we have done is we have taken those generally accepted principles and actually put them in the policy with how the procedural motion should work and those sorts of things. And so hopefully you will find this draft to be close to what you had in mind, and certainly we invite and look forward to additional discussion and direction as you work through it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
to save a lot of time and effort, is it possible to get a red line of changes that are in this document from that document there?
It is. We did not draft it that way simply because I'll give you an example. If you look at the organizational meeting portion of the rules, they divide between odd number years and even number years, and it was a lot. And in Johnston County, we don't do that because your first meeting in December is always the first Monday. But we can go back in and do that if that's what the board would like for us to do.
It just would be very helpful
Okay.
to not have to put them side by side and read them. Most legal documents, you can get a red line and see the differences.
We
I
can.
don't understand why we'd need I mean, if we see this and like it and mark it up and agree on it, why do we need anything else to compare it with?
Because I want to compare it to what the School of Government suggests, and I want to know what, if any, changes were made. And rather than having to sit there and read it, most lawyers, when they change a document,
I
can
understand.
give you a red line.
But I think
copy
I
of
could
it.
read through this, mark it up, and if we all come to an agreement, frankly, if this is what we want to do, I don't really care what that book says.
Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I would agree. I mean, I'm not practicing law, but in practicing engineering, in reviewing contracts and reports, that is often the case, that we do have a red line to look back to see exactly what changed. And I do appreciate the notes and the logic behind in there that we've got so far, but if it's not too much trouble, I don't know if you can go turn on the
I
edit.
can't,
You didn't track changes.
Well,
and,
what we can do is we can retype it and do it with red lines. We can do that.
Good.
We can do that.
Okay.
A lot of paper.
Do it, handle it.
Yeah, well, thank you for.
If we had already adopted that and been working with it, and this represented a change, I agree, we ought to see the red line. But if we're talking about adopting this and having it formalized, then this is what it is. I don't really see the need to see where it came from. It's just my thinking. I'm looking to save time and money.
Okay. Yeah, if you would, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think we need to see what the base was before we look at what the final is. So if you
We can certainly do that, and it shouldn't be too terribly difficult to do because in the comments section, we
did most of it.
delineated what we
Okay.
changed, so it shouldn't be terribly
Okay.
difficult to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, other board comments? I'll start with you, Commissioner Braswell, and work our way around. Any comments?
Same comment. We need to be working on water, sewer, availability, policies, the whole 9 yards. We're going to get serious about it.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Godwin?
Comments. Folks have commented today and emails and that sort of thing. And, when we go through these public comments and we hear what the citizens have to say, there's oftentimes I want to respond, but I don't want to get into a back and forth like you talk about, Mr. Chairman. But I don't take it lightly. If someone emails me and asks me a specific question, I always respond to it. If it's just to me. If it's to the board in general, I typically, our manager usually responds and have some interaction with the citizen. But I certainly would want it known that we take these things seriously. I've seen things in print that says we're obviously Satan worshipers and everything else. And you take that with a grain of salt. But every time 3 or 4 people tell me I should be driving a Chevrolet, I got 12 people telling me I should be driving a Ford. So you got to take all of it in stride. And if I don't respond about the Chevrolet or the Ford, I listen. I'm hearing what's said. That's all.
Vice Chairman?
I'll echo a little bit of what Mr. Godwin said. I read all the emails that we get. I don't always, first of all, I'm not a huge email person anyway. I don't, sometimes it's hard to sit down and have a conversation about something in an email format. My phone number is published on the website, and I answer my phone, and anybody that's ever called me or texted me, I think they can attest to the fact that I answer it, and I call you back. But I'm not a huge email person. I just never have been. So I don't mind to, I read it, take it under advisement, and there are times I'll reply back and say, do you have time for a phone call? and that's the extent of my email, you know. But anyway, I hear the concerns, and I think they're certainly valid, and I think we need to, pay attention to those, and I will certainly do my best to try to do my part.
Commissioner Brazel?
Mr. Chairman, since we're talking about emails answered and not answered, first of all, I want to bring it the fact that this is a policy board, not an operational board. 80% of the emails we get has to do with operation. And that's the responsibility of the county manager to answer. I'm not going to answer operational issues because I'm not going to get involved in it. I'm 100% sure that the county manager calls or answers the emails that are appropriate that we need to do. I read them, but I can't address issues of water or taxes or whatever in the emails we get. Also, this board gets a lot of emails concerning school policy about the Board of Education. I'm not going to answer those emails because it's not in my purview. Now, I'm like Commissioner Harris. Somebody sends me a direct email, I will answer it if I'm in a position to answer. And then a lot of questions sent to us in email, there may be some legal activity going on in those areas. There might be something that we know, and legally, we don't need to say anything. So I think the policy is good. You're elected, we're all elected up here, and so, if you feel comfortable about answering them, certainly as an elected official, you can do it. But I don't feel comfortable because I'm not going to answer operational issues. It's not.
Mr. Stevens? Mr. Smith? I had, I think, three things. First two are quick. The third one's going to take a little bit of time, and I may ask y'all for some input on that one. In fact, I will ask y'all for some input on that one. But first is we have the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners Conference next week. I think the majority of the board will be in attendance, as well as the manager. I will be on vacation that week, so I won't be there. But that is happening next week. And also, I sent y'all a request to start looking at March, and I think I proposed a date, I want to say 15th and 16th or something like that, mid-March, in between meetings for next year's strategic planning and budget review session. So look at a couple of dates in there for that, if you would get that to the manager, so we can start looking at planning that. And I think that involves staff in their budget stuff ahead of time too. So if we could do that. The third thing is a little more in depth, and we deal with it every meeting that we are here, and we've heard Commissioner Brazel already touch on it. Is we're into transitional time in Johnston County's history. We are seeing growth. I won't say like never before, but it's like never before, and we have lots of challenges in infrastructure in particular, and we talk about that almost every meeting we're at. And I agree with Commissioner Brazel. It's time to move some of this down the road. We have limited sewer capacity. Water, we're a little bit better off, but we're still dependent on the Neuse River for both of those. We have some agreements with other places, but basically we're dependent on the Neuse River. And then it's complicated by, when we discuss capacities, it's paper flow because somebody got something approved 1, 2, 10 years ago on paper, nothing's happened, and we got actual flow. And then we also have the state saying, and Ms. Farmer can correct me on this, but if you're building it, you can still have allocations towards that. And I think this board is a little more conservative than that, and we have all talked about, we would like to have it built before we start giving it away. And so today I have really 4 things that I want to bring up, and there's some sub issues on all of these. First one is we are a policy-making board, as we just talked about. This is the board that makes policy, and part of that policy should be allocation of our sewer. And that is a board decision. It's not a state decision. It's not a staff decision. It's a decision of this board. And we have, in my mind, we have a short-term issue that we even heard a case on at the last meeting in our residential sewer service areas that we have. You know, there's a limited amount, and is that where we want to put it? I think the board's consensus is we don't want to put it there. I don't know, we've said that in a way that people understand that clearly, but I think that's something we do. And then we also have the towns. We've all talked about the sewer and growth being pushed towards the towns, and right now I think we have 4 towns that are dependent on us for sewer, and we have, I think, 0 agreements in place with those towns, which presents a problem for us. And so we have really nothing to give away in this board's opinion. I think it was 190,000 gallons at the last reconciliation. And, you know, where do we want to give that? You know, we should decide how we're going to give that out. And I think it's fair to be transparent and the public know, you know, how we're going to do that. The second is more long-term, and Commissioner Brazel has hit on this too. You know, we need to set aside or decide how we're going to allocate, you know, is industrial, retail, commercial as one category, you know, how much we set aside for that. I don't have any, not looking for answers today, but I think that's a big part of it. And then we have the residential component. We've talked about municipalities pushing growth there, but the second piece of that is residential growth in our unincorporated areas. So those are, I guess, 2 things under allocation that I would like for this board to think about. The short term on the now is, you know, do we keep hearing cases where people are coming for residential sewer and we have 190,000 gallons, in my mind, to give away, not giving away stuff that's going to be in our plant, it's going to be built in 2024. Can I get through all these?
Sure.
Okay. I thought you were
just sitting here.
I thought you were ready. I was going to say, my mind don't break my train of thought. I'll be
I
going.
was just moving because I was uncomfortable.
All right. Yeah, I didn't want to get my train of thought messed up.
One part of my butt got tired. I wanted to put it from the other part.
Well, hang on. I'll try to save the other part. Here we go.
That's too much information.
And then I guess the other piece of that policy is, you know, a time frame for using that sewer allocation. We make that, I think it's kind of open-ended right now. I know other places, they put time frames on that. And I think that when we're talking about paper flow and we have some, you know, an industry come and we say, well, we don't really have that because we've got, I'm throwing a number out there, 500,000 gallons of paper flow or, on paper that's not really there yet. So that all ties into policy making. The second piece that's important, I believe, is regionalization. We see, you know, communities, towns, you know, already working together to try to get that resolved. We have a study right now where we're looking at, and I just want to make sure that it's clear that we want to take a look at full regionalization, and that means not just the Neuse River for our source of water and our discharge point for our wastewater. That's looking to Cape Fear River for some of that, interbasin transfers, just to make sure that's part of the report that we're going to get. We also have industrial areas throughout the county that I think we need to take a look and make sure that we can service as we bring more and more industry. I see Mr. Johnston sitting in the back there as he's working every day to bring more and more industry that we're looking at that on a regional basis. So those are 2 things under regional. And then finally, I guess the question, next to finally, 2 things that are tied together is, I think we all know that when we build, when 2024-ish, 5-ish, when we get that plant built and we have basically a net of 2 million gallons plus or minus some treatment, that's going to be used up so fast that we're going to be, I don't want to be starting over, you know, in 2025 doing this. So my thoughts are we need to look at expansion now. We've got a contractor out there, and let's look and see. And again, I'm talking without knowing dollars, so keep that in mind. But I think we look at that now. The other piece is we talk about land all the time, and it's not getting any cheaper. You know, we had to issue a nitrogen credits. I don't know that they're going to get any. I don't have any idea what that market's going to look like. But I think the longer we wait, the more we're going to pay for those. And if we can get those tied up, I don't know where we're going to get them from, but at least let's take a look at that and let's be proactive, because I don't want to be sitting here in 2025 or whatever board is here in 2025, and we're starting the process of designing, or at least contracting the next phase of the wastewater treatment plant expansion. So that's a lot that I laid out there, but any comments on that? Yes, sir.
Chandra, I think, I may be wrong, but either you or someone from your staff about paper flow mentioned that we have some commitments that may be as old as 10 years old.
Some may be. We try to clean those up yearly whenever we can, but once a sewer permit is issued by the state, we have to maintain that flow as long as that permit's valid.
Well, let me challenge that, okay? When on vested rights, when a subdivision is approved under our section 1410, statutory zoning vested rights provision, and under 1411, a zoning vested right shall be deemed established upon the valid approval or conditional approval by the Board of Commissioners, Planning Board, Board of Adjustments, or Planning Director as applicable. So, and then it says a zoning vested right is determined as a right pursuant to, it gives a statute, to undertake the completion, the development, and use of property under the terms and conditions of the approved site-specific plan. So when a development is approved under the zoning, the developer gets vested rights, okay? And part of that vested right is the sewer right or the water right or whatever comes with that plan. Now, as we go forward, if you go down to section 1413, and it talks about vested rights. And under 1413B, notwithstanding the provision of subsection A of this section, the approval authority may provide that rights shall be vested for a period exceeding 2 years. Normally you get it for 2 years, but not exceeding 5 years, where warranted in light of relevant circumstances, including but not limited to the size of development, the level of investment, the need for desirability for the development, economic cycles, and market condition. These determinations shall be in the specific decision-making authority for each permit type at the time the site-specific vesting plan is approved. So under our zoning code, when a development, all the development rights expire after 2 years. That would include that sewer permit, unless there's a provision to extend it for 5 years. So I don't understand why we as a county, pursuant to our zoning code, don't take those permits and that paper flow off the books. Because to leave that on the books is just gumming the system up for active people who are developing and people who just have it and are not developing it. I don't understand why we keep those on the books.
We can go through that paper flow and categorize that. I don't think there's a lot of, for example, residential developments that were approved and we allocated capacity to and then they're dropped and no longer valid. Most of the paper flow that we have on the books is going to be like a commercial development that was approved for zoning. Maybe it's a 30-acre tract and they recorded 2 or 3 lots out of it and they had their overall plan approved, but they permitted their sewer allocation all up front, you know, for their, what they know they're going to need to build out that development. So maybe they've recorded 1 or 2 lots and used part of that capacity, but some of it's still there because they've not used it all yet.
But
same for like a residential development. If they do 200 lots approved and built at a time, we're not actually making that real flow until the houses are built. So we got to go through the process of building roads, building infrastructure. and
I
building
understand that,
houses.
I understand that. But if there's no activity,
Right.
no activity at all,
Yeah, those, we would go back and try to find a means
Well,
to take that back. I don't think there's a whole lot of those. A lot
it
of
would
these
be nice if
partial.
someone said there aren't any. I don't understand, as precious as our sewer allotment is, why we can't
Right.
say there are none.
Well, I can go back through that line item and confirm that for you, but that's, what we do yearly is just to try to find any of those. But I can get you an update on that so we can categorize
You-
those. If that would be helpful.
I
in
don't
looking at
necessarily need an
policy.
update. The information that we were given is that it was said in this room by someone from your staff that we have paper flow that's 10 years old.
There could be some, because
Okay,
there
but
could
there
be like
shouldn't be.
commercial
But-
development, like, there's
Why
some-
if commercial development is not ongoing,
it's recorded lots. So, for example, there was a commercial park there's a commercial park at McGee's Crossroads that I can think of at the interchange there that was approved and recorded 15 years ago, and it has a sewer permit associated with it. The lots are there to be sold, but the development's been approved and recorded, but the lots are not all built upon yet. So whenever they sell that lot, they're anticipating that sewer capacity will be there for that lot.
Okay, well,
because they
let's-
had their overall approval.
let's just say, like you said, it's 30 acres of land and 3 1-acre lots have been recorded. Do you keep the sewer capacity for the other 27 acres?
We do. We would hold that on paper, whatever's been approved, because it was an overall development plan of approval, and all of that capacity was approved at that time for that development.
If you have a residential development and the developer, say it's 4 phases, and it's just for easy, 200 lots, 50 lots per phase. And the developer does the first phase, builds 50 lots, then doesn't do anything else, doesn't build phase 2, 3, or 4, and it sits there for 5 years. Do you keep the flow for that?
We require them to permit it on a phase-by-phase basis. So we don't permit and put that flow on our paper flow category until we approve their plans for that phase of the development.
I understand.
Yeah. So the other phases
Let's
would not
just
be on
say-
the books. If the other phases have not been permitted yet, that's not considered in our flow, committed flow.
Let's say they've been approved,
Mm-hmm.
but there's been no work to build them. Do you still leave that on the books?
We look at those on a case-by-case basis. So if it's one that wouldn't have if the approval is no longer valid, we could go back and say, hey, we're taking this capacity back.
The zoning thing here says if they're not developed in 2 years, it's not good anymore.
I could be wrong, but I think if the overall subdivision were approved at one time, that approval still remains valid if they've recorded some of the lots.
Just curious, do we have any type of reconciliation program as far as going back to make sure that they are continuing to build out there, they are moving
And so
forward?
every year, we go through our spreadsheet of all the permits that we have on the books. And we look at the ones that have, just paper flow and no actual flow. And we go to our billing records, our accounts. We see how many have become active accounts. So if we have 15 new active accounts for a subdivision than we did the prior year, then we move some of that flow from paper flow to actual flow, because we know that's become actual flow. So then we maintain a portion until that project is built out on paper.
Mr. Chairman, I just think we ought to have crystal clear rules on this. I don't know all the details. I may have an opinion, but it's always been my understanding that as a developer, that if you're not taking, if 2 years goes by and there's no activity, you can lose your permit and you can lose your subdivision. That you just lose it, and also the sewer and water permits. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I believe that to be true, and I think it ought to be clear. And the rules ought to be clear enough to where it's not some judgment here, some judgment there. Either you do it or you don't do it. And as important as sewer is and water is for our county, we just need to tighten those rules up. That's number one. second thing, I want to address, and I appreciate Commissioner Brazel, and I support exactly what he says about water and sewer. It's this board's fault that we don't have water and sewer. It's not the staff's fault. It's not the manager's fault. The people who use water and sewer pay for it. We don't pay for it. The county doesn't pay for it. The user pays for it. There are customers out there that are willing to pay for it. The reason we don't have it is because we didn't say, and I appreciate Brazel 1 or Brazel 2, depending on how we want to call them, saying that we are a policy board. And we need to set that policy. It's our responsibility. We're not spending any tax money. We're not doing anything other than making it happen. And it's on us. And it's on us to determine how it's to be used. That's a policy issue. And we just need to remember, though, that water and sewer are where it all begins. And that affects a lot of people. It affects our citizens' investment in their land. It affects farmers who need to sell because they want to retire. It affects how much land we use and how we use it. It affects how much open space we're going to have. And I'm telling you, whatever growth this county is going to have, it's going to have. We're not going to change that. What we can change is the form it takes. That's all we can change. People are going to, that want to move to this county are going to move to this county. It's happened. I've watched it. When I was born ancient times ago in the city of Raleigh, there were 40,000 people lived in Raleigh. When I moved to Clayton in 1973, there were 2,000 people lived in Clayton. And Raleigh now, its metropolitan area is approaching 1 million. Clayton's got 28,000 people. It's inevitable what's going to happen. And we can either put people on an acre lot with a septic system and use up all our land where our farmers don't have land to farm and we don't have open space, or we can do what is called smart development and have dense development to where our land is used in the most efficient way, and that requires both water and sewer. And only when we have that density can the development community provide the amenities and the quality of life that our citizens deserve. Because if you just have a road and acre lots, you don't have the economies of scale to build swimming pools, athletic clubs, walking trails, all the other things. And then that puts all the burden on the county to provide all those things. It's all related. And to talk about a piece here or a piece there or a piece there is not planning how we want this county to be in the future.
Mr. Chairman, I think, I could add 30 minutes of what I think about the sewer things, but we don't have a sewer. We don't actually have a policy, if I'm correct, Councilor, sewer policy. We do, okay. But anyway, you brought up some good points, Mr. Chairman, and I think what I would like to suggest to you, that you put this on the agenda item for next meeting at night, and we'll have time, the public will be aware that we're going to talk about something, and let's get out there and let's hash it out and get it done. Okay?
I agree with that. That wisdom you share, I think we do need to, since this is not on the agenda, but I think in preparation for that agenda, we need to hear some thoughts so that we have some idea of what needs to be presented to us on the 15th at 6 o'clock. So I'll listen and if you want to chime in. Mr. Stevens.
My only comments were going to be, with regards that we do have a sewer policy, making sure that if we're going to change it, that we are ensuring that we are, I hate using the word earmark, but for lack of a better word, earmarking, that we are leaving additional opportunities for commercial and industrial, in an effort to do our 30 and 30 that Mr. Johnston wants to achieve. I think the best way we can achieve what Commissioner Smith was talking about was ensuring that people are not driving out of Johnston County to go to work. And I think, we need to ensure that we don't have developments that were planned 10 or 15 years ago that haven't come to fruition, taken away from the opportunity that, Mr. Johnston has to encourage other industries, to move into our county.
Did you want to add anything? You're good? I did have one question. So you mentioned we do have a policy. So the policy I occasionally read from, I don't know that it has actual allocations in there. I mean, I had some for the town, when we had agreements.
We have.
So we know you can tell me today how much we have allocation for industrial use in this county?
We have that where it says other county commitments on the spreadsheet that you're given monthly. That's intended to handle some of that.
Okay, so we can talk about that because that's I was going to get with you on breaking that down further. And I appreciate the second spreadsheet on there so we can know exactly. Because I remember when we were doing something at McGee's, there was some discussion on that.
If I can.
Sure.
Briefly. The county does have water capacity. The county does have sewer capacity. The county has a 20-year capital improvements plan that this board approved earlier this year to ensure we continue to have adequate capacities for the next 20 years. Now, it's based on our projections of, our best projections that we can provide based on, historic growth, recent growth, and what we anticipate occurring. It's also based on the county's existing residential sewer service policy, assuming that we would continue to provide residential sewer service in those areas and it be limited in those areas. We have $184 million worth of projects under construction right now, water and sewer projects, to ensure we can continue to meet these needs and these demands. We've got $53 million worth of projects under design, in addition to a $55 million water treatment plant expansion where an RFQ has been issued. We have an advertisement for request for qualifications to expand the new wastewater treatment plant that's already under construction, to go ahead and add another $4 million to that. Like I said, we're looking for the engineer in order to complete that, so we have that out underway. We also, y'all are aware of the other studies that we have been working on as far as expanding our discharge capacity to the Neuse River per our MPDES permit, which is again in this 20-year planning period. The state does allow us to allocate against the 2 million gallon a day expansion that we are working on the plant. That additional 2 million we'll get when the plant is completed. And we don't have a lot of concern because we do have so much paper flow. We do have 2 million gallons a day of paper flow. So knowing how these are going to come online and come online over time, we're safe on continuing to allocate. We see no reason to stop allocation. Where we do have some limitations is some portions of the transmission system in getting to that plant. And because we have this comprehensive plan for the additional capacity when the new plant is online, some of those transmission areas are limited until the new plant comes online in 2024. So I just wanted to add those comments on what we are doing, our capital improvements plan. I'll be happy to go over that if that's what you want to do at the next meeting to look at our planning options, or I'll address any other specific concerns you might have.
Shatter, it just seems to me, and this is not my area of expertise, let me just say that, but there's a big disconnect between what I hear staff say and what I hear this board say. They're not in sync. One, the staff says we're moving forward to bring all this stuff online. We have allotment, we have this, we have that, and then the board says, no, we don't have it, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. There's just not a clear understanding. And Dick, I know you've been wanting to say something, so I'm going to yield to you.
The way I understand it, we're currently permitted for 9.5 million gallons a day at our existing plant.
We're 11.5 total because we have the discharge permit that includes the new plant.
The new
So we
plant.
can allocate against that full 11.5, but 9.5 is what we have operational at the
I
existing
think
plant.
we would be very derelict to start allocating sewer that we don't have constructed yet, because there's going to come a time when we got to deliver. As I understand it, with our 9.5 million gallons, we're discharging around 6.7 million gallons a day. That leaves us 2.8 million gallons. Am I to assume that all that is paper flow? Pretty much
Right.
all of it.
Any other than the 190,000 that.
So we're nearing 3 million gallons on paper flow right now. And our policy, is that a documented policy where someone could go and find it? Do we have, in that policy, do we have breakdowns for residential, commercial, industrial? I mean,
It's a residential sewer service policy, and it says that we will reserve capacity allocation for industrial development and town growth for the 4 towns that we provide allocation to. Now, there's a question on how we handle that now, because when the policy was adopted, the towns were growing at one rate, and now the towns are requesting sewer capacity at a different rate. So that is something we have to continue to work out with the towns if we are going to reserve capacity for the towns, and that's what we've tried to do with these updated interlocal agreements that gives them some excess capacity. However, they've started permitting capacity very quickly in the last 18 to 24 months.
I mean,
But that policy, it doesn't have numbers in it. It does not have numbers. It just says we're going to reserve capacity for these uses. And it specifies where residential sewer development is allowed and the conditions that it's allowed.
That's in the sewer service districts and such as that. But you talked about a policy, and we're trying now to get an engineer on board to start designing an additional 4 million gallons a day to go to the plant, at the landfill. Where do we pick the 4 million gallons? Because we picked 4 million gallons 4 years ago, and it's conceivable that the day that plant starts up, we can have zero availability of allocation if we start pre-allocating as the state will allow us to do. What's going to prevent that?
So our current discharge permit allows us to go to 13.5 million gallons a day. So that we can do. That would be a 2 million gallon a day expansion at the existing plant. But the way the plant's designed, 4 million gallon a day trains make sense, and a lot of our infrastructure, for example, preliminary treatment infrastructure, our discharge pumps, our effluent discharge pumps, a lot of that was sized for a full 8 million gallons a day at the new site. So that's why we would go ahead and go to the 8 million gallons a day there. And we have to keep in mind, we're borrowing money up front to build this infrastructure. We have to make sure that we can pay that debt and that we're going to receive that flow and receive those capacity payments and those system development fee payments in order to pay that debt. We've always been in a position where we build the capacity I don't want to say just in time delivery, but in time to meet the needs of the county, but we can't get so far ahead of ourselves that the existing customers are having to pay the debt for that future development to occur. And if that future development doesn't come, then they would be saddled with that debt, increasing their rates. So we have to make sure that I don't want to say don't build too much at a time, but we plan for it and have it ready to go, but we build it to a point where we can ensure we can pay that debt associated with it.
Whose decision is that? Is that your decision? Is that this board's decision?
That's in our capital improvements plan, our projections.
Whose decision is it how much capacity we build? Is that staff's decision? Is it your decision? Or is it this board's decision?
We certainly take direction from the board. We can present our capital plan.
No one has asked us. No one has asked us how much capacity we want to build. We've not been part of that decision-making process.
We've been following our capital improvements plan.
I understand that, but at some point in time, someone's got to stand up and say, and quit complaining about we don't have sewer, which this board does, and yet this board is not taking the responsibility to instruct staff as to how much sewer we want to build. Do we want to build 4 million, 6 million, 8 million? That's a decision this board needs to make. And let me ask you another thing. I hear the chairman talk about a contract with 4 towns. I've never seen a contract document that we're trying to get with these 4 towns. Has that ever been shared with us? Do we know anything about that?
Maybe
Members of,
Wilson Mills,
I'm just talking about the 4 towns.
so members of the board have participated in some of those meetings. I know Mr. Commissioner Harris did attend.
Have we as a board,
We have not.
all of us, every board member is equal, has every board member had a chance to see what's in the contracts and what the dispute is?
So we've been negotiating those with the towns.
I know you've been negotiating.
And we have not, we don't have the final document yet, but we
That's right, so
certainly have a draft.
we've never seen.
That's right, it's not been presented
So
to the board yet.
we don't know what's going on. The public at large doesn't know what's going on. And the public at large is because there's been no announcement that there may be a change. The public at large is moving on under the old rules, let's say. They're spending millions of dollars based upon the old rules. And then all of a sudden, based upon the old rules, the county refuses to sign permits without telling the public that there's going to be a change?
We've been working with the town since 2019.
I'm not talking about working with the towns. I'm talking about telling the public.
Right.
Telling the public.
When
what's going
developers
on.
have
They don't-
inquired, we've
they
let
don't
them
know that.
know these are pending.
But the public doesn't know that. The developer community doesn't know that. The fact that you're having a private conversation with the town is not public knowledge. Don't you think maybe we should have, as a county, have made an announcement that we're not going to honor the contracts with the towns anymore, and that people need to understand that that's the rules, and whatever they do at their own risk? Didn't we have a duty to tell them that?
We've been telling developers as they ask about additional capacity that this is an issue. And when if they're going through the town, we said, we're working on these, we need these in place.
Why can't we tell everybody? Why can't we make an announcement as to what our policy is?
So Commissioner Smith, I'll say, for me, I think that's what the goal is of, when it's on the 15th, that was exactly what we do.
What are we going to do about the past, Mr. Chairman?
That's, I don't know what we're going to do about the past. We're going to have issues crop up from that, I'm sure, because one thing that, the state doesn't set our policy. They may allow us to stuff, and I think that's what this board is saying is we don't want the residential sewer areas that we have right now, and even the towns without agreements, there's no more. So we're not operating under the state saying, you can give it away before it gets here. We're saying we're not operating that way, and that's the message we need to get out is say, hey, until we get it, we're not giving it away. So
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
It's my understanding we had an agreement with the towns.
I think they've expired.
No, we historically
Okay.
had agreements with the towns.
We have a 1979 agreement with those 4 towns.
Whatever it
that
is,
references the
whatever
201 plan.
whatever we had, no one ever said to the public, that agreement is no longer valid. No one. And the towns think they're still valid. The county says they're not valid. And people are getting caught in the middle.
Well, I will say, I think we've been trying for 2 years to get the towns on board, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the email was sent to the towns saying,
Why don't we tell the public?
Why
Why don't
that
we
is the
tell
missing
the
piece.
public?
Yeah, that
Why
is
don't
the
we
missing
leave
piece.
them in the dark?
For who asks. I try
Yeah.
to tell them that is an issue. I've told
Yeah.
everyone who comes, who asks the county about it. When they go directly to the towns, I can't control what the towns.
Is there a common theme from the towns as to why they haven't executed it?
I thought at least 3 towns were on board, ready to sign the agreement until the last few weeks. So I'm not certain. I think they don't like the idea of having to buy capacity and pay for capacity from the county, pay for bulk capacity from the county. They've not had to do this in the past. The other towns who've purchased capacity in our plant have done that, but our 4 regional towns that we've always provided service to have not had to. They paid a higher rate per 1,000 gallons for treatment, but they didn't buy capacity up front. It's very difficult to plan to meet those needs when we don't know what's coming.
Right.
With no plans, with just sending it as needed, that's very difficult to plan for and pay for. And now we're at the point where the infrastructure that was addressed in the 1979 agreement, it's all at capacity. It's already been expanded. It's 60 years old. I mean, it's infrastructure that it has to be upsized and upgraded to have new capacity. So how do we pay for that additional new infrastructure that's needed to meet the flows, to meet these additional new flows? Is it right that the way we have always, our board has looked at it, is we try to have growth pay for growth. That's why we have a system development fee for new development in the county. So the new development pays that system development fee, and it goes towards paying the debt for our capital projects that are required to build new capacity. And that is the procedures we have been looking at and trying to talk to the towns about for over 2 years. We've said, you can establish a system development fee, and one of the components of that system development fee is to buy that bulk capacity from the county. That allows us to be able to recoup the money to pay for the additional treatment capacity and transmission capacity that's needed to serve this new development. And then you don't have existing customers paying for new development. It's growth paying for growth.
And is that in our regional plan? Commissioner Sheldon, is that in our regional, the study we're doing now, have those 4 towns in particular provided their new growth numbers to us?
I think they have provided that to the,
Okay.
I don't know to what extent. I have not seen that. I'm waiting on an update on that. I've not been, we've had a third-party consultant handling that, so.
All right.
I know they've met with them.
Chandra, in the past 2 years, you're aware that members of the public have spent millions of dollars to go to these towns, hire engineers to draw plans. The towns have approved the plans. The towns have given them a permit and have sent it to you to sign, and you have refused to sign it.
Just recently. We have to be able to build the infrastructure to take the flow, and we have to be able to pay for it.
I'm fine with that, but you just need to tell people
Right,
ahead
and we
of
have
time.
been.
You've got
Anytime a
people
developer asks to
who
be
relied
informed.
upon the way things were without any notice,
Right.
without any public notice or whatever, that we don't honor that contract anymore, or we're not going to do that. And they move along as the way things were, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the county refuses. And that's the first they hear about it, to sign the permit.
Well, I hate that's the first I hear about it, because again, every developer who's asked us about it, I've always said, there's an agreement that's got to be signed between the town and the county. That's got to be worked out. And we've signed, well beyond, we've continued to sign to be able to take it in good faith in working with the towns, assuming we could reach a resolution and come to agreement.
All right, so I was going to say, we haven't heard, and if we're going to meet on the 15th on the agenda, sounds like we've got a lengthy agenda, but I did want to give this side a little bit more time if they had something before we move on.
If you had an engineer picked out under contract today to start a $4 million, which I don't think is substantial enough, but a 4 million gallon per day expansion to the plant that we're building at the landfill now, what is the time frame before that 4 million gallons could be online? Do you have a feel for that?
Well, part of that is we'll have to expand our discharge permit. We can only get 2 more per our discharge permit. We have been struggling getting getting responses from the state to.
Well, we're going to
get
have to
that,
derate
but
the old
we are.
plant once we get the new plant online, right? By 2 million
We are.
gallons.
And one thing that we can do to get back capacity quickly is to re-rate the old plant. We can, because we're going to take some flow off of the old plant and send it to the new plant, will free up some transmission capacity, but we can still re-rate the old plant. We can bring that back online.
The transmission facilities you talk about that are inadequate, will they be online by the time the new plant is online in '24, or are
So
they
that-
going to be?
Our full improvements plan accounts for that, yes, so that we have sufficient transmission to the old plant and the new plant.
Now, the effluent discharge from the landfill plant will come back to the same exact discharge point that we're using now, correct?
Right.
So that facility, is it built for 8 million gallons, 10 million gallons, and what's the design capacity on that?
As far as I think it's 8 million gallons a day. The
So-
the new plant, the new discharge, but then the old plant, could still stay
Yeah, it's
online.
discharge right where it's at. The reason I'm asking is, Smithfield, as you see, approved the 2005 unit subdivision. Then shortly after that, they approved another industrial apartment complex. There's several things I read in the news, and I see where they've approved this, they've approved that, and I, as a commissioner, when I look at that, I've been telling people that, we're limited, very limited in sewer, yet these towns continue. I would think, now I know it's over a 6 or 7 year period, but 2005 residential dwellings is going to be a big draw on our 2 million gallons aggregate we're going to get from the new plant. So I can see a point where we would be almost out of sewer the day that plant's put online.
The way they propose.
Especially if we allocate it according to the state, which I'm totally against, because if we haven't got it built, we shouldn't be allocating it, but.
So typically, that's going to be allocated on a phase-by-phase basis. The town does not have that sewer capacity, in reserve or on hold with the county. It's allocated as it's permitted, and it's, permitted on a phase-by-phase basis. 2,000 lot subdivision is not going to be built in 1 or 2 years.
No, it'll take 6 or 7 years
We're talking about
or
a long-term, plan to develop that. And so capacity would be issued incrementally as the phases are constructed and needed.
I would think our biggest asset would be the 2.8 million gallons or less than 190,000 that is sitting there on paper to look at that. Now, we're not going to be able to recoup every bit of it, but I would really like to know how much of it is, what the age of it is, and how many gallons we're
And I
talking
can do
about.
that. I can go back through there and give you a more detailed report so we can see, is there any that could easily be released? But we can categorize that better for y'all so you can look at that and see what we can do to free up any of that.
I think if we're proactive, we need to do some research and find out what we think the growth's going to be and based on what we
And
got.
that's
I
what
know of
we've
several
done,
projects
right.
now that are not have been brought forth because they're saying they're going under the concept that we don't have sewer. They're just sitting in the.
So, our 20-year capital improvements plan includes detailed planning as far as growth projections for the county, and we've asked the towns for some. We've kind of put some of our own guesses in there, as we don't have 20-year plans from all of the towns, so we have tried to put some projections in there in order to meet those needs. And that's one thing in the proposed agreement, is that the towns would be required to give us some kind of planning, some kind of projection, so we can include that in our plans and plan for it and have it available. When we have no projections and no future, projections, it's very hard to, the county shouldn't be planning for the towns. They should be telling us what they anticipate they need. We shouldn't be doing their projections. And hopefully this regionalization study will help with that, and we'll be able to pull all that together better in one study.
We definitely need to talk about regionalization because Princeton and Kenley are still working under the assumption that they're going to get additional discharge in the Little River Basin, which we both know is not going to happen. They're going to spend a lot of money on engineers and environmental stuff, and then going to be told they can't get an enlarged district. And at that point in time, if they're going to continue to grow, that growth is going to come to us too. We're going to have to, we're going to have to, if we're going to continue to grow, we're going to have to do that. And I don't know how you stop growth. I don't think there's a magic bullet that you can shoot to stop growth or even slow down growth. I think we have to, like Mr. Smith says, we determine the form of that growth, what it's going to look like. And like Pine Level is telling me that they've got enough plans either at the planning board or that they're aware of with engineers or already approved and ready to more than double the size of the town.
Yep.
And that's going to bring more commercial growth. It's going to be restaurants, grocery stores, shopping centers. They're going to come around because they go where the people are. So I don't see that we have a choice except to start being proactive and get some figures. And is 4 million the magic number? Who picked that? I mean, did we pick it, or did you have a
That's we picked
consultant?
that at a staff level with our consultant, knowing how we can add on in trains.
That's
add
right. If
on
you do it in
that.
trains, you can always, if the growth don't come, you can operate the plant, keep the bacteria fed, keep the process from going septic on you by operating it in trains. And you can shut down a train or you can add on a train. That's been my belief all along. And that's a certain point of that at the old plant. They've got, last time I was down there, they had one of those aeration basins were down, and they said that they're available if they needed it.
You've got to be able to take down processes and clean out too. So
Right, you got to
gotta
have something
plan
for
for it.
maintenance, yes.
Right.
But I think regionalization, we're going to have to start, because the state don't like to hear from a Pine Level and a Princeton and a Kinley and a Micro. They much rather talk with a larger entity that they know is going to be here, going to be able to follow through, and it's going to have the staff to efficiently operate the facility. And those things are important. And that's where I think we need to start setting up meetings with these small towns. And every time I talk with them, they seem to be on board. But we've not really made an official move for regionalization to get the people together and say, okay, let's talk about the pros, and then let's talk about the cons. And let's come together, and maybe then we can start putting together some real numbers. But we got to move forward. We're going to be sitting here one day with no sewer capacity.
I anticipate we should receive an update from our consultant, a memorandum from this, technical memorandum report from this first phase of the regionalization study within the next few weeks, is my understanding. So that will be helpful in being able to have those conversations and this board considering how you want to move forward with what works and with the other entities in the county, what works to move forward, what type of regionalization.
So I would add to that, when you talk regionalization, you tend to talk in terms within the county. Well, at least when I'm speaking of regionalization, I'm talking opportunities outside the county, because I don't think we're going to go to the Neuse River for much other. So that's when I speak in terms of regionalization. Yeah, I want to look at other areas and what they've got going on. So with that,
I just got what kind of leverage do we have to get these towns to sign this updated agreements? Maybe that's a council question.
Well, right now, I've talked with the towns for some time, and I said it's going to get to the point where I can't continue to sign flow trackings to accept your flow that you want us to allocate to you.
Do we
And
draw a
that's
line
what's
in the
happened.
sand?
That's what's happened in the last few weeks. I have, there's been several towns that I've said I can't sign these until we have this worked out.
Right.
And maybe there's another way to handle it. Maybe there's another way to address it. But that's the last I had heard. We tried to get these agreements in place July 1 of 2020, July 1 of 2021, July 1 of 2022, and they just don't get feedback.
So what we've done hasn't
So I
worked.
don't know what else to do other than.
One thing, it would really upset me if someone came and said, look, we've been talking about for a year pulling flow from the Neuse River, and we're over in an adjoining county, but yet they've not come to us, and they've been talking about it for 2 years. I think if we're planning on using the Cape Fear, we need to start creating a dialogue with the people in Harnett County, the area we're going to try, and let's look at, they might be totally against us using their water. We don't know what's the consensus of that board. We need to start talking and see if there is an avenue that we can pursue there. Because we're making an assumption that, yeah, it's going to be, we just go down and take a percentage of their water and dump a percentage of our sewer, and hey, everybody's happy. But that may not be the case. So I think it would behoove us to start talking to some people in Harnett County. I mean, we got a lot of legwork to do, and it's going to rest on us. We have to make that call. It's like Mr. Smith said, we are the final, this is where the buck stops.
Vice Chairman Harris, you've been quiet, so we'll end it. Actually, I'm going to end it with me, but I'll let you go.
Well, I mean, I think everyone brings up some very valid points, and I think it also illustrates the dire need to have this as an agenda item where we can just hash it out and try to get to a result. I will say that there's been a tremendous amount of work that has gone into trying to get these agreements in place with the towns. I mean, Commissioner Braswell and I attended 2 different meetings with Chandra and Rick, and the whole team went over there, and we have, I mean, she's talked it till she's blue in the face. I mean, I will say that because I've heard it, and Mr. Braswell was there as well. I mean, it's trying to get an agreement in place to replace something that's a 43-year-old agreement that I just think is, it's questionable whether it's even still relevant or not. And so,
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
That's inside baseball. Y'all may have gone over there, but we never talked about it in this room. Other commissioners were not included.
Well, let me address that. I mean, I don't think there was ever anything to bring back to the board because we were still in negotiations trying to figure out how it's going to work.
Don't you think we should?
Mr. Braswell and I went because that's our district, and that's why we were included in it.
If you ask these 4 towns, do they think they have a contract, what would they say? They would say yes, wouldn't they?
Well, they would say that they're hanging their hat on a 1979 agreement.
Whatever it is, ever how flimsy it is, they would say they have a contract. And we as a county say they don't have a contract. Didn't we have a duty to tell somebody that? Didn't we have a duty to let the public know?
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I think until you have something to go out and announce to the public.
Well, you can at least say, we don't have a deal.
Right.
We don't have a deal. The county is sending a notice to 4 towns that you don't have a contract with us anymore, and we're telling the public. We had a duty to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that's what we're doing now. We're just saying, look, we're in good faith. The county's been operating on that 1970 whatever it is agreement up until this point. But at some point, I think they've just drawn a line in the sand and
Shannon just said she talked to the counties 2 years ago, talked to the counties a year. So for 2 years, we've let this drag on, and other people didn't know and have relied upon the status quo.
Chandra, quick question, new to the board, learning a lot about water and sewer really fast. With regard to the paper lots you talk about, do you have the town's paper lot numbers too, or is that included, or is that the county? Does that include the towns of what they've allocated out? Do we know what those numbers are?
I'm sorry.
The paper lots.
The paper allocation includes what we have allocated to the towns. Paper allocation includes what we've allocated to our retail customers and our bulk customers.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think I ever really got an answer, but environmental studies and everything for the addition at the plant, if we had a contract, if we had an engineer on board today.
We have one on board today for the discharge permit, the NPDES one.
Okay.
Is that?
So if we had that permit, how far down the road are we looking at to get that extra 4 million gallons?
I would assume probably a 2-year construction period. I would anticipate being able to bid an award in '24 and have it online mid-26.
So that 2 million gallons aggregate, a better plan would be go to the existing plant and bring those 2 million gallons back online if we can.
And we could do it simultaneously. We have our NPDES discharge permit expanded. We could do it simultaneous, or we could just bring those 2 online first at the old plant. It's a matter of transmission and balance and flow on where we're going to accept the flow. For example, if the 2,000 lots in the town of Smithfield came online, and we could, one of those projects is going to have to build a line directly to the plant anyway, at least one of those. So we could take that additional flow for treatment there and not have to build transmission improvements. And that would be one way.
And it free up some of our other
capacity.
transmission.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Hester, Chandra, thank you for stepping into the fire and not knowing which way it was coming and looking both ways. And I do appreciate what you've done. I know it's not like you've been sitting there. It's just that 2 years you've been trying to do this. But I think, as Commissioner Smith said, this board has and other boards have probably fallen a little short on making sure that people know, the public knows that this is a situation, and I hope they're hearing it today, but Mr. Hester, do you?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say to Mr. Smith too, and any lack of communication or information you have, that's on me. So I take responsibility for that. So I apologize for that. And
You may take responsibility, but your checking account isn't missing any money because of it.
I understand.
There are a lot of people out there whose checking account is missing a lot of money because of it.
So kind of wrapping this up.
Yes, sir.
I think you've heard plenty of conversation. That I expect the 15th meeting will be maybe even more lively, but I think too what you've heard is this board is, I won't even say changing direction, but clarifying our position for staff to be able to understand that we're not following the state's policy. It is this board's policy that we're going to follow for sewer allocation and distribution and through there. Now, we've got to work on getting that done, but yeah, there's short-term things and long-term things, so I'll make sure you have at least my list, and you can go watch back on YouTube, but to make sure that we may have to pick the more critical pieces off first, but I imagine this will be a long discussion on the 15th and probably even after that. So again, Chandra, thank you for stepping into the fire and coming through there on that for us. And I don't have anything else, so I think
Mr. Chairman, one brief note. We'll have our annual conference with the association before our next meeting. And any business items that I need to vote on, I'll try to monitor. I don't really know what the issues might be at this point. But I'll try to get a pulse from this group that's there as that develops and unfolds.
Okay. And we do have a need for a closed session, so I will look for a motion to go into
Okay,
closed
Mr. Chairman, I move the board go into closed session for the purpose of consulting with an attorney employed by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industry or other business in the area pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A4 to establish or instruct staff concerning the negotiations of the price and terms of a contract concerning the acquisition of real property pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5 and for a purpose of personal pursuit to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A6. Man, we got them all.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We were now going to closed session.